Mrs. Crime, Mr. Wade, bringing you the stories. Stay tuned for a lot more. Today's unfortunate story is about a Lavinia Fisher. She was an American criminal who, according to urban legends, was the first female serial killer in the United States of America. She was married to John Fisher, and both were convicted of a highway robbery, a capital offense at the time, not murder. Historians have begun to question the veracity of this traditional legend, and some accept that Lavinia Fisher never killed anyone. She was, however, an active member of a large gang of highwaymen who operated out of two houses in the backcountry of near Charleston, the 5 Mile House and the 6 Mile House. It is not clear whether the 6 Mile House was a hotel, but it served as a hideout for a number of outlaws. Mrs. Fisher and her husband resided in Charleston, South Carolina for most of their lives. Together they owned an inn, the 6 Mile Warehouse, which they managed to in the early 19th century. The hotel was located 6 miles north of Charleston, hence the name. During the couple's time there, reports were made to the local sheriff about guests disappearing. Due to the lack of evidence and the popularity of the couple with many locals, these complaints came to nothing. Miss Lavinia Fisher would invite lone travelers into the 6 Mile Wayfarer house to dinner and ask them questions about their occupations, merely trying to determine if they had money. She would send them up to their rooms with a cup of poison tea. Once the men drank their tea and went to bed, her husband would go to the room to beat them almost to the point of killing them. Another version of the legend was that the tea would put only the men to sleep for a few hours. Much of what actually occurred in the alleged murders of the hands of John and Lavinia Fisher has become widely exaggerated through time, so factual details are hard to find. However, contemporary news accounts in the Charleston Post and the Courier claim that a vigilante gang went to Fisher's neighborhood in February, the year of 1819, to stop the purported gang activities that were occurring there. Satisfied that they had accomplished their task, the group returned to Charleston, but left a young man by the name of David Ross to stand watch in the area. Early the next day, Mr. Ross was attacked by 2 men and dragged before the gang that had terrorized the region. Among them was Lavinia Fisher, to whom he looked for help. However, rather than help him, she choked him and then smashed his head through a window. Ross managed to escape and immediately alerted the authorities. Immediately following the incident, another traveler named John Peoples asked if there were any vacancies. Miss Lavinia replied that there were unfortunately no room, but he was welcome to come inside and rest and have some tea. John happened to hate tea, and not wanting to seem rude, he dumped it when she wasn't looking. She interrogated him for hours and eventually said she discovered that, in fact, they did have a room. He then went to bed. He felt like he was suspicious about the interrogation but was worried about being robbed. So he decided to sleep in the wooden chair by the door. In the middle of the night, he woke to a loud sound of the bed collapsing and discovered Fisher's plan. He jumped out the window and rode to Charleston to alert the authorities. Based on these 2 accounts, the assailants were finally identified by name, something that law enforcement had previously lacked. Police were immediately dispatched to the location, and during the ensuing investigation, Lavinia and John were located. along with two other gang members. John Fisher surrendered the group in an effort to protect his wife and shielded her from her possible gunfire. Later, during interrogation, he gained attempt to protect Lavinia by giving the identities of all involved in the gang. Nearly a full year elapsed between the time of the arrest and their execution. At the arraignment for the Fishers, pleaded not guilty, but were ordered to be held in jail until their trial, which would take place in May, while their co-conspirators were released on bail. At their trial, the jury rejected their pleas of innocence and found them guilty of highway robbery, a capital offense. However, the judge allowed an appeal, and they were given a reprieve until the January session of the court. During this time, the Fishers occupied themselves with plans to escape, as they were housed together at the Charleston, South Carolina jail, also known as the Old City Jail, in a 6x8 cell and not heavily guarded. On September 13th, they put their plans into action and began their escape. Things did not go as planned, as the rope they had made from prison linens broke, leaving Lavinia trapped in a cell and John set free. He was unwilling to continue the escape plan and was recaptured. The two were then kept under much tighter security. The Constitutional Court rejected their appeals, and on February 4th, year 1820, both were sentenced to be hanged. Awaiting execution, John accepted the counsel of the Reverend Richard Furman, a local minister, but Lavinia became even more vitriolic. On the gallows in front of the Old City Jail, before John Fisher's execution, Reverend Furman read aloud a letter John had composed, which stated that since he had become a Christian, he could not be executed with a lie held to his account. Therefore, he insisted on his innocence and asked mercy on those who had done him wrong in the judicial process. After the minister read the letter, Fisher then began to plead his case before the gathered crowd of some 2,000. He then seemingly contradicted himself by asking for their forgiveness. Miss Lavinia stated to the congregation that she wanted to be hanged and buried in her favorite dress. Miss Lydia was buried in a potter's field near the Old City Jail. Claims of her burial at 150 Meeting Street, the Circular Congregational Church, or at the 4 Arcade Street, the Union Church, appear to have been fictions promoted by tour guides. I hope you guys enjoyed this unfortunate story. I'm Mr. Wade and Mrs. Crime. And once again, we bring it to you.